I signed the papers without hesitating. That's the part that still gets me, how easily I said yes, how quickly I picked up the pen like it was nothing. Like co-signing a $47,000 business loan for my sister was just another Tuesday. Maybe I thought it would make her love me differently. Not more. Just differently. The way you love someone who actually shows up for you. I was wrong. My name is Nora. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that being a good daughter meant being an invisible one. The kind who never asked for anything, never caused a scene, never called my parents at midnight just to hear someone say, "Are you okay?" I was the daughter who handled things. Quietly. Efficiently. Without complaint. My sister, Diana, was the daughter who was loved loudly. She was 3 years younger than me, and from the time she could walk, she had a way of filling a room that I never quite figured out. Not because she was particularly funny or especially kind, but because she wanted things with such confidence that people around her just bent. My parents bent first. Then her boyfriends. Then her friends. And eventually, me. I want to be careful here, because this isn't a story where I paint Diana as a monster from the beginning. She wasn't. She was charming in the way that only truly selfish people can be charming, fully present when she needed something from you, genuinely warm in a way that made you forget every time she disappeared before. I loved her. I want you to know that. I loved her the way you love something that keeps burning you, not because you're stupid, but because you remember what it felt like before the heat. Our parents were good people in the way that some parents are good people, well-intentioned, church-going, proud of their family in public. But behind closed doors, the math of their love was never quite even. Diana was the baby. Diana was fragile. Diana was special. And I was capable. I was independent. I was fine. Being fine is the loneliest thing in the world when you're not. I moved to Charlotte at 23 for a job in accounting. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I built something slow and steady, the way I did everything without fanfare, without anyone watching. I got promoted twice in 4 years. I rented a decent apartment, drove a used car I'd paid off early, and started putting money away in a way that made me feel, for the first time in my life, like I had solid ground under my feet. Diana, meanwhile, had been drifting. She'd dropped out of community college after a semester, moved back home, worked a series of jobs that never lasted more than a few months. My parents covered her phone bill, her car insurance, groceries. They didn't talk about it openly, but I knew. Every time I called home, there was a new reason why Diana needed something, and a very thin layer of silence around the fact that our parents were running low. Then Diana turned 28 and discovered she was an entrepreneur. It happened fast, the way Diana's enthusiasms always did. She'd met someone at a wellness fair, a woman named Greta, who sold essential oil blends and crystals online, and within 2 weeks, Diana had decided she was going to open her own boutique. A holistic lifestyle shop, she called it. She had a name picked out, a logo she'd had designed on Fiverr, and a whole vision board that she sent me pictures of at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. She called me the next morning. "I need a co-signer," she said, without preamble. "For a business loan. The bank won't approve me on my own because of my credit history, but if you co-sign, we're good. It's $47,000. I've already done the math. The shop will be profitable in 18 months, and I'll have the whole thing paid back in 3 years." I remember standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, staring out the window at the parking lot below. I did the calculations in my head the way I always did. My credit score, my debt-to-income ratio, what it would mean for my own financial future if something went wrong. "Diana," I said carefully, "if you default, I'm responsible for the full amount. You understand that, right?" "I'm not going to default," she said, like the word itself was offensive. "Nora, I've never been more serious about anything in my life. This is my thing. I finally found my thing." She'd said that before. About the photography phase, the online reselling phase, the brief but memorable pyramid scheme phase that my parents still didn't know about. But she was my sister, and I was Nora. I handled things. I signed the papers. The first year was almost convincing. Diana opened the shop in a little strip mall about 40 minutes from my parents' house. She sent me pictures regularly, the shelves, the candles, the little crystal displays near the register. My parents went on opening day and called me afterward, breathless with pride. "You should have seen it," my mother said. "She's really done something, Nora. You did a good thing, helping her. You did a good thing. Not thank you. Not we're proud of you too. Just you did a good thing, the way you'd compliment a stranger who held a door open." I visited twice that year. Both times, Diana was warm and distracted, always someone she needed to talk to, always something that needed her attention. She showed me around like I was a customer, not her sister. Not the person whose name and credit were attached to the loan keeping her lights on. I noticed things, the way accountants notice things. The inventory turnover didn't make sense for the foot traffic I observed. The staff she'd hired, 2 part-time girls from her old high school, looked bored and undertrained. The back room was chaotic. When I gently mentioned it, Diana laughed and said I was being corporate and changed the subject. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Month 14. She missed a loan payment. I found out because the bank flagged my account. I called Diana immediately. She didn't answer. I called 3 more times that day. On the 4th attempt, she picked up. I know, she said, before I could speak. It was just a slow month. I'll make it up next month. Diana, if you miss a payment, it shows up on my credit report too. We talked about this. I said I'll handle it. Her voice had shifted, that subtle edge she got when she felt criticized. You don't need to call me 4 times, Nora. I'm not a child. She made the next payment. And the one after that. And then, 6 months later, she missed 2 in a row. By then, I'd already started to understand what was happening. The boutique wasn't failing dramatically, it was failing quietly, the way most small businesses do. A slow bleed. Not enough customers, too much overhead, a lease she couldn't renegotiate, and a sister who'd rather rearrange the crystal display than look at a profit and loss statement. I drove down to see her without calling first. The shop was closed on a Tuesday afternoon. The hours sign said they opened at 11. It was nearly 2. I sat in the parking lot and called Diana, and this time she answered on the first ring, which told me she'd seen my car. She came out of the back door looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before. We sat in my car and I laid it out plainly. The way I always laid things out, gently but without flinching from the numbers. She was 4 months behind on a supplier invoice. She'd stopped reconciling her accounts in February. The loan payments she'd made in the last quarter had come out of her personal savings, which were now nearly gone. I need you to co-sign a small bridge loan, she said, when I finished. Just to get me through the next 6 months while I rebuild. I sat there for a long moment. Diana, I can't co-sign another loan. Nora, I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying that I am already on the hook for $47,000. I can't take on more risk. I need you to talk to the bank directly. There may be restructuring options. But I can't. So you're giving up on me. Her voice was flat. Got it. That's not what I said. She got out of the car. What happened next, I didn't see coming. Not because I should have been blind to it, but because there are some betrayals you simply can't prepare for, not because you're naive, but because you loved someone before you knew what they were capable of. My mother called me on a Thursday evening. I was in the middle of making dinner, and I almost didn't answer because I was tired, and I knew from the specific quality of her silence in recent calls that something was building. But I picked up. Diana told us what happened, she said. I waited. She said you refused to help her. That you could have saved the business, but you chose not to. I set down my spatula. Very carefully. That's not what happened. She's your sister, Nora. I know who she is. I co-signed a $47,000 loan for her. I drove 4 hours round trip to try to help her figure out. She needed you, and you turned your back on her. I don't know how to explain what happens to you in a moment like that. It's not quite anger. It's something colder. A kind of clarity that you almost wish you didn't have. Mom, I said, Diana has missed multiple loan payments. Payments that affect my credit. I told her I couldn't co-sign additional debt. That's not abandonment. That's... Your father and I talked, she said. Her voice was very even, very resolved, in the way that meant the conversation was already over. We think you've always resented Diana's success. We think this is about more than money. I almost laughed. Almost. Diana's business is failing, Mom. I'm not going to argue with you. A pause. And then the words I will hear for the rest of my life, probably, at random moments, in the middle of otherwise ordinary afternoons. We raised 2 daughters, Nora. One of them has never let us down. I think you know which one we mean. The call ended. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The stove was still on. I turned it off. I sat down at the kitchen table and I looked at my hands and I thought about all the ways I had tried to be enough. All the payments. All the quiet sacrifices. All the times I swallowed something hard and smiled and said I'm fine, don't worry about me. My phone buzzed. A text. Both of my parents, on a message thread together. I read it once, then again, to make sure I understood what I was reading. We've spoken to Diana. We support her completely. You've made your position clear. Until you're ready to be part of this family the right way, don't call us. Don't visit. As far as we're concerned right now, you are not our daughter. I read it a 3rd time. Then I put my phone face down on the table, and I sat very still. And I thought, with a clarity that surprised even me. Okay, if that's what you want. Okay. I didn't cry that night. I want to be honest about that, because in stories like this, there's usually a moment of collapse, the shower, floor, the phone calls to friends at midnight. But I had spent 31 years being fine, and apparently the muscle had become load-bearing. I made tea. I sat on my couch. I thought about what I could actually control. The next morning, I called the bank. Not to report anything, not out of spite. To ask a very specific, very practical question. As a co-signer on a business loan in active delinquency, what were my options? The loan officer I spoke to was professional and clear. My co-signing obligation was real and binding. Diana's continued missed payments were already affecting my credit. However, and this was the part I needed to hear, there was a process. If I could demonstrate that I had been making good faith attempts to resolve the situation and that the primary borrower was unresponsive, there were legal steps I could take. Not to erase the debt, but to protect myself and to notify the bank that I was no longer willing to act as a passive party. I also called a financial attorney, a consult, just to understand the full picture. She was direct. You can't simply remove your name from a co-signed loan, she told me. But what you can do is force the bank to pursue the primary borrower first, document your non-liability for any new charges, and if Diana formally defaults, position yourself to recoup any losses through civil action. What does default look like? I asked. The bank calls the loan. They'll go after Diana's business assets first. If there aren't enough, they'll come to you. And if I've already begun documenting my attempts to resolve this, then you're in a much stronger position than if you sat quietly and waited. I thanked her. I paid her consult fee. I went home and I started a document. Every missed payment, every unanswered call, every conversation I'd had with Diana about the loan, with dates and summaries. The visit to the shop. The conversation in the parking lot. All of it. Then I did one more thing. I sent the bank a formal written notice drafted with my attorney's guidance that I was requesting they make all future contact directly to me as co-signer, that I was documenting Diana's non-compliance, and that I intended to pursue every legal remedy available to me if the loan went into full default. A copy went to Diana. I didn't explain it. I didn't frame it. I just sent it. Then I texted my parents, both of them, together, on that same thread where they'd told me I was no longer their daughter. As you wish. 3 words. I put my phone down. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely still. The calls started 46 hours later. First Diana. 6 times in one morning, starting at 7 a.m. I let them go to voicemail. Her messages started controlled and became, with each one, a little less so. The bank had called her. She didn't understand what I'd filed. She needed me to explain. She needed me to call them back and tell them it was a misunderstanding. She needed me to help her. I listened to all 6 messages. I didn't call back. Then my mother. Then my father, separately, which meant they'd escalated to the point where they were dividing the strategy. My mother's message was soft, almost confused. Like she couldn't quite reconcile the Nora who had always come running with the Nora who was apparently not picking up. My father's was harder. He used the word lawyer, which would have frightened me once. It didn't anymore, because I had already spoken to one. Then Diana again, this time in a text. Nora, please. I don't have anyone else. The bank is going to take the inventory. Please just call them and tell them you're still involved. Please. I read it. I set my phone down. I went for a walk. Here's what I want to say about that walk, because I think it matters. I wasn't happy. I want to be very clear about that. There was nothing triumphant about standing on a sidewalk in Charlotte in the thin November light, knowing that my sister's business was unraveling and my parents were leaving voicemails I couldn't bear to delete. This wasn't the revenge you imagine when you're lying awake rehearsing what you should have said. It was quieter than that. Sadder. And somehow more real. What I felt, more than anything, was grief. Grief for the version of my family I had carried in my chest for 31 years. The one where my parents saw me. Where Diana and I were actually close. Where I'm fine didn't have to be armor. I cried on that walk. Just for a little while. Then I kept walking. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. But something made me answer. It was an attorney. Not mine, Diana's. Or rather, the attorney my parents had apparently retained on Diana's behalf to facilitate a resolution. He was polite, professional, clearly a little uncertain about the call he'd been asked to make. I've been asked to reach out on behalf of your family, he said. I understand there's a co-signed loan situation that's become complicated, and they were hoping we could arrange a conversation. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. Did they tell you that 2 weeks ago? My parents sent me a text message telling me I was no longer their daughter. Silence. Did Diana tell you that I co-signed that loan for her? That I drove 4 hours to try to help her restructure before any of this happened? That she told my parents I abandoned her, rather than explain that I couldn't take on additional debt? More silence. Then, I wasn't given that context, no. I didn't think so. I wasn't cruel to him. He was just doing his job. And the job he'd been given was built on a version of events that left out the most important parts. I told him, calmly and briefly, that I had retained my own attorney, that I was fully documented, and that any further communication should go through her. I understand, he said. He sounded tired. I'm sorry for the situation you're in. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. Diana ended up losing the shop. The bank called the loan into default 6 weeks after I filed my notice. They went after the business assets first, the inventory, the fixtures, the lease deposit. It covered about a third of what was owed. The rest became a civil matter that my attorney is still navigating. I don't know yet what the final number will be for me. There will likely be a number. I have accepted that. My parents have not called since the attorney conversation. Diana sent one final text about a month after the default. It said, I hope you're happy. I read it. I didn't respond. Not because I was still angry, but because there was nothing left to say that would matter. I've thought a lot, in the month since, about what I would do differently. And here's the honest answer. I would have protected myself earlier. Not because I regret helping Diana, I don't, fully, even now. But because I confused love with liability. I thought that if I just held on long enough, gave enough, stayed quiet enough, the scale would eventually even out. That they would see me. That Diana would become, in some meaningful moment, the person I needed her to be. That's not how people work. People are who they are, until they decide to be something different. And you cannot co-sign someone else's becoming. What I know now, that I didn't know when I picked up that pen. My name has value. My credit, my resources, my time, my willingness to show up, those things are worth something. And handing them over to someone who has never once asked, "Are you okay?" is not generosity. It is disappearing. It is making yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's story and hoping they'll notice you there. I am not small. I was never small. I just acted like it for a very long time because it was easier than demanding to be seen. That text message, "You are not our daughter," was the most painful thing I've ever received. And it was also, in a way I'm still learning to hold, a gift. Because it told me something I had been sensing my whole life but couldn't quite name. I had been making myself responsible for their love. Performing hard enough, giving enough, being enough, as if love were something you could earn through perfect execution. You cannot. And you should not have to. The last thing I want to say is this. I did not win. I don't think in terms of winning anymore. What I did was stop losing myself in a game I never agreed to play. I sent 3 words, "as you wish," and then I let them have the version of the story they wanted. And I kept the truth. And I kept myself. That is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything.